This week, 27 sporting bodies covering everything from AFL, tennis, motorsport, netball, golf and rugby league issued a joint public statement expressing their support for federal Labor's plan to change our nation's constitution to include a so-called voice to Parliament. Here was Tanya Hosch, AFL General Manager of Inclusion and Social Policy this week.
As many of you know, the Australian Constitution at the moment recognises Queen Victoria, recognises lighthouses, even recognises coinage, but is silent on the history and existence of the First Peoples of this country.
For a start, this is a gross misunderstanding of the Constitution on so many levels. I mean, first, it does not have the purpose of being an historical or cultural record. The Constitution's job is to dispassionately allocate the responsibilities of the state and federal governments and to set up the three arms of government: judiciary, parliament and executive. To most people who have looked at it, our Constitution is a boring legal document, even if I think it's pretty fun. And that's by design. If you think it's meant to make you feel at peace with history, well, you're going to be disappointed. That's not its job, and it wouldn't be effective even if you wanted it to be. Healing is an individual experience best done with a psychologist or a pastor, not with a bunch of constitutional lawyers. Again, as much as I like them. And to suggest that the Constitution recognises lighthouses and coinage but not Aboriginal people, what a nonsense. The Constitution allocates the powers of the federal government, mostly in Section 51. One of those powers is lighthouses. Another is the power to set Australia's currency. Funnily enough, it also has a power to make laws for the advancement of any race of people in subsection 26. And that's what supports native title and cultural heritage laws for the benefit of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. If their advocate thinks that lighthouses and coinage have been recognised simply by giving the government a power to legislate on them, well, by that logic, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are recognised in the same provision of the Constitution, 51. But the logic here is just too silly for words. These sporting bodies have, perhaps because they're run by a wealthy elite from our inner cities, many of whom have never had an Aboriginal person around their home dinner table, grossly misunderstood their role. The question of whether this is the right thing to do to our nation's democracy is a highly contentious one. But sport isn't, and it shouldn't be. When politics seeps into sport, it becomes not merely divisive, but lecturing and toxic. In March, cautioning against this very move, Tom Switzer of the Centre for Independent Studies said, "How would each of the individual sports codes function with a formal alternative board in their governance, reflecting the views of Aboriginal people, without whose elaborate consultation they could not advance or develop their sports?" Ponder that. It could end up with each sport having two governing bodies, perhaps in conflict with each other. But that's just what might happen to Australia's Parliament with this voice to Parliament. Pulling no punches, the member for Herbert, Phil Thompson, put it this way: "To every single sporting organisation which has made this tokenistic gesture, I would encourage you to employ one Indigenous person in every Aboriginal community across Australia to run year-long local programs to get kids off the streets and into sports. That's what meaningful action would look like." And you know, he's right. It's very easy for sporting bodies in our cities to tell everyone else, governments, citizens, what they should be doing. But if they're not doing it themselves, why would anyone listen? Unless you think Phil Thompson's just a mere culture warrior mouthing off, he's not. Phil is married to a wonderful Aboriginal woman and deeply involved in his local community. Townsville's got a big Aboriginal population, and he gets what's needed to make a difference. And, shock horror, it's not a lecture from hypocrite sporting bodies that, among other things, take big dollars from the very gambling companies that impoverish remote communities. So good on you, Phil. May there be many more straight shooters prepared to take on this cosy coalition of inner city elites in the corporate world who think they have the right to tell Australians what to do while bearing none of the consequences for themselves.